Welcome to the Better Than Bitter podcast, episode number 35. Today, we are going to be talking about dads, divorcing dads who have major struggles between fatherhood, dating, maybe taking on new responsibilities. And today, I have a guest. His name is Matteo Bavaro. And Matteo is a life coach, he's an author, and he is a founder of Divorce Dads Help. It's a coaching platform that really is dedicated to helping fathers who want to rediscover their best selves after divorce. He's got 30 years of experience as a private investigator and is now serving as a director of client engagement at Schultz and Associates, which is a law firm. And it's a law firm that is focused on men's and fathers' rights. So he dedicated to this world of men that men live in, fathers. And so he brings both professional and personal insight into this journey of fatherhood after divorce. And as you know, I always want to bring on guests who have had divorces, have gone through the divorce process. And Matteo, well, he's gone through too. And now he empowers men to reconnect with their children, overcome limiting beliefs, and build a purpose-driven life. His mission, well, he aligns perfectly with mine at Better Than Bitter. So I'm so happy to have Matteo joining us today, helping men grow resentful.
Thank you, Tania, for having me
Welcome,
on
Matteo.
your podcast. I love what you're doing. So thanks for doing what you do.
Well, I love people who really also have aligning missions. They really realize that we do have the opportunity to be better than bitter. Like I said to many of my clients, I'm not telling you divorce is going to feel warm and fuzzy when you're going through the process. I'm just telling you that you do have an opportunity for a more amicable resolution at the end. And the way that you approach your divorce, the way you learn how to communicate more effectively, and the way that you really do work on yourself through that process, trying to be the best version of yourself. You know, we can't go backwards and redo where we came from, but we do have an opportunity to grow. And I always say that divorce isn't about failure. Divorce is about personal growth and it's about self-discovery. And we have a new opportunity to change the course of our next chapter of our life.
And the many experiences I've had in my life, getting divorced was one that I could say was probably the biggest when it comes to personal growth that I've ever experienced. So yeah, you're 100% right about that. So
the three different things that I believe that men who are going through divorce really struggle with. One is fatherhood, taking on this new fatherhood role, which is in a co-partnership versus a together partnership. The second is dating. I get a lot of men who come to me and they want to get back out there. But again, if they've got a co-parenting responsibility and they have custody, getting back out there and getting themselves ready for that, and then how to juggle that with having some sort of custody is always challenging. And the other part of it is, oh my gosh, I have to now do absolutely everything, which before it was like divide and conquer. And now it's like, oh my God, there's no his role, my role, their role, everything. You got to do everything. And we do too as, the spouses. So it's not just a men thing. It's a mother thing as well. All of a sudden solo parenting and you're like, oh my gosh, like I haven't gone to the supermarket in God knows how long, or I know how to do laundry, but like I was just kind of doing the laundry and somebody was folding the laundry, or, it's like I have to go food shopping. I have to put 3 meals on the table. I have to pack lunches. I have to organize the carpools and the play dates and make sure that, the teenager isn't, doing something they shouldn't be doing. And you're doing it all alone, for the most part.
There is 3 different aspects of life after divorce. And like you said, the first is the actual divorce itself and what you go through. And now all of a sudden, you're used to seeing your child on a daily basis. And now you're not. You're seeing them every other weekend and maybe once a week at best, if you don't get this 50-50 shared custody. And then there's the aspect of doing everything on your own, trying to put yourself out there and go on dates, and how do you navigate that? And then of course the co-parenting aspect, which is it could be amazing, but I find for most men, it's very difficult because There's a reason why you're not together, because you're not on the same page on many things. So if you're not on the same page, usually in a relationship, it kind of transfers over to parenting. And I think that's where a lot of difficulties lie. And I could explain how it went for me. Are you ready for that?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that because it's interesting that you say that because I think that when we were married, like in my marriage, we did struggle to be on the same page in the style of parenting. We both came from different styles of parenting. We parented different. But upon divorce, we really came together and our co parenting is so much better as a divorced couple than we were as a married couple. So again, I think it has to do with growth and it has to do with doing the work and understanding how to communicate more effectively with one another. And that brings together in a co-parenting situation. So would love to hear your story because like I said, my story is maybe unique. I think we're doing it better now than we ever have.
My first divorce, I didn't have children. So it was manageable. Besides the heartbreak and just going through that part, that was tough, but it's something that time heals. But I really found during my second divorce was, I would say, the most painful chapter of my life. My daughter was about to turn 2, and I went from being a full-time dad to every other weekend, like I said earlier, and maybe once a week. And it was tough to get on the same page because it was, I just kept looking at what the other side was doing. Things I couldn't control, I tried to control. And there was years of, and I'm not putting blame on my ex, but it's not something she did intentionally, but I didn't even know what this was at the time. But I've learned that it is negative gatekeeping. And like I said, not to put any blame on anyone. And it could be the man, it could be the woman. But I just found that, there was years of missed calls, withheld information, maybe on both ends. I'm sure I was to blame for part of that as well. And again, not to blame anyone, but there was subtle and not so subtle comments made, and it affected my daughter more than anything. She grew further and further apart from me.
I think that most people refer to it as parental alienation.
So for example, if your kid's coming home from the dad's, let's say, and the mom says, "Hey, what did you do this weekend?" We went to the park. Nice. Who did you play with? Well, there was no kids there. You went to a park. There was no kids. Wow. Okay. What did you eat? Well, I had a bag of potato chips. Okay. You didn't have food, like real food? No, no. Dad just gave me chips and then we ate after. Okay. So it's that kind of stuff, right? And then it kind of follows up with, well, hey, why don't you go take a shower and I'll make your favorite meal, right? It's that kind of language that really it seems very innocent, but it is damaging to a child because they start piecing this type of language together with, wait a minute, my dad didn't give me a proper meal, or what, he didn't bring me to a place where I had company and kids to play with and that kind of stuff, right? Does that make sense?
Yes. So it's interesting how you positioned it that way. We both are coaches, and at the end of the day, you can't control what the other parent's going to do. You're not going to be able to control what the other parent's going to say. The only thing you can control is how you react to it. And so we are only in control of our reactions, and in doing that, we also are only in control of our own thoughts about the circumstance. So again, those thoughts are creating feelings within us. Those feelings are what are creating the actions, reactions, and behaviors. So, however, we're scripting it, the child comes back and was like, Mom said you didn't give me a proper meal the last time I was here. That might be a fact. How you interpret that or what you decide to make that mean is what's going to create that emotion in you as the parent who's hearing that from their child. And when you hear that, you have a choice. You go back. Do you go yell at your, ex-wife and say, why are you even saying that to the kids? Blah, 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 blah. Well, what's the result you're going to get from that? If you're attacking and threatening her, she's going to attack and threaten you right back. So the next time she's going to do it again. Because again, it's the battle of the wills. So where would you go with it?
And I was trying to control what was happening on the other side, which I had no control over. But that was eating, that was really eating at me. And hearing, I'd hear these subtle comments here and there. For example, if my daughter were to call her mom, the first thing out of her mouth would be, "What's wrong?" "Hi, honey, how are you?" or whatever. It was always "What's wrong?" insinuating that something is wrong with the call, right? So that used to just bug me. And it was a real power struggle to kind of, the whole situation was a bit of a power struggle when it came to doing certain things with our daughter and co-parenting. So yeah, I think what changed for me was when I let go of trying to control things and trying to control how she responded, which has nothing to do with me. All I can control is how I respond to it. And like you said, um, responding in a way that's caring and not, you're not trying to put any negativity on the other parent is huge. It's huge for the child. So I think that was the big shift, is when, the number one thing I would tell men is stop trying to control the narrative from the other side. Just stop. Just worry about what you're doing and how you're showing up for your child.
Exactly. If you believed that you took your child to a place that there was no kids there and you weren't feeding them proper meals, and that's what you were hearing from the other side, the only thing that you can control is your thoughts about what you did that day with your child, and that you can do better the next time if you believe you have to. I actually remembered a great story about dad's days when I was married, and I went on a trip with my three best girlfriends from college, and we were all pregnant, but one was pregnant with their first, one was pregnant with their second, which was me. And then we had one was pregnant with their third, and one was pregnant with the fourth. Pregnant with the first one obviously didn't have any comments back because they didn't have any kids at home. I wrote a 5-page essay on what to do with the kid that's at home to my husband at the time, like what to eat, what to sleep, how to wear, every single little direction possible was in my document. Number 3 was smart. Number 3 was like, all right, I've got 2 kids, I've got one on the way. My husband needs support. So she actually hired a babysitter, to the
Wow.
babysitter that they normally have, who knows what to do with the kids, to shadow the dad, to just be there for him when he needed it. And they weren't there to micromanage him, just when he needed support. And then number 4 literally packed her bag, walked out the door, and was like, these kids are going to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches all weekend and be happy as freaking clams. They are going to throw their clothes on the floor. They are going to be all so happy. When I get back, they are not going to be happy to see me. So again, I don't think it just divorce versus not divorce. I think in general, you know, depending on the roles you play every day in your
Yeah.
lives,
Yeah. You do
women
that a
tend
little bit. You're
to
right.
judge, men and their capacity, right? Even if you were married and you took your daughter out to the park and you would come home, your wife at the time be like, "What'd you feed her?" I don't even know if it's I think there's always a negative gatekeeper in your house, most likely. I'm making crazy assumptions here, and I'm not trying to stereotype whatsoever. But then again, I'm a mom, and I know, like, I micromanage too, especially the eating and the playing and things like that. So I think it's all our mindset on how we decide to interpret what's happening. Is this
That's
happening
very
because of the
true. Very good
divorce,
points,
or is this
for
just
sure.
happening because it all has always happened? Yeah. Right. So obviously we're here because you support dads, and it's so great. And so tell me a little bit more about why dads come to you, and how you support them,
Okay.
in some of these instances. Like, I'm all about tools in your toolbox. And I think coaching is so great because it gives tools in your toolbox. Whereas therapy is, and I gave the example the other day about a friend of mine. She went to therapy. She goes, she talks it out, she comes back, and something happens again. And I was like, oh, but what kind of tools in your toolbox did your therapist give you in order to deal with this situation? And they said, I just have to book another appointment to go back to therapy to talk to her. And I'm like, that's the difference between coaching and therapy. I was like, coaching is going to give you those tools, right? To march yourself forward. So you come to a situation, you got the tools, and then you can actually guide yourself out of whatever situation.
You're so accurate with that, 100%. And what happens when men come to me is they're struggling. Okay, they're struggling to connect or even reconnect because they've lost connection with their child, and they're really struggling and they don't know what to do. It's hard, and like to your point, when you go to a therapist, talk therapy is great. It does work for some people, but it doesn't kind of hit the root cause of what your problem is. It kind of makes you feel better about the situation and what you're going in for, and that's great. But like you said, something else comes up and you're like, whoa, how do I deal with this? So I find that men perhaps go through that at first. They might seek some therapy because that's the advice they're given, and they may try to even talk to their attorney about it when they're going through their divorce and how to handle certain parenting situations and stuff. But attorneys are great and they're absolutely needed. I think they're the most one of the most important things when you're getting divorced. However, when you've gone past that, past the therapy, and you're completely stuck, they come to me. And one of the first things I do is I align their values. So I see where their values are in relationships, in parenting, in employment, in their career. I go through all of that. And basically how I elicit their values is I ask them questions about why they want things, why it's important to them, and how does it make them feel when this versus that. And then I get a bunch of values listed. And then I find out which value is more important in a certain area. So I'll give you an example. So if I elicit someone's values in relationships and their highest value is freedom, there's going to be a problem there, right? Because freedom and relationships kind of don't go hand in hand, right? So when I do that, it really exposes to the person how they're living their life. If they're living their life out with their friends all the time and having all this freedom, but they want a relationship and wondering why it's not working out. Well, wait a minute. We need to realign those values to what you really want. And maybe a relationship's not what you really want based on how you're living. And another example is like if you value love, let's say, and you're not living in a loving way, then you're never going to fulfill that value. You're never going to get there because you're frustrated or stressed all the time. But your highest value, you want love. You'll never find it. You'll never get there. Truly, absolutely, 100%,
Well, that's
100%.
you also have to
So,
love yourself first, right? And I think that, yeah, I think that with relationships that are ending in divorce, so many
yes,
people believe they need connection, right? And the definition around connection is really different for a man and a woman. And, that need for whatever physical intimacy or whatever that is meaningful or defined as connection to one, whereas connection to the other, might not be the same level of connection, right?
yeah,
Somebody
the
wants
love
to be heard,
languages. Yeah.
somebody wants to be seen, and one person wants to be touched. Everybody has their different definition. And I think that the really interesting thing about what you were just talking about is about love is like we all have the maybe that we want to feel love, we want that, but at the end of the day, unless you try to get to that place of loving yourself, you're never going to really ever be able to love effectively because you're looking for love for a sense of validation or maybe for a different purpose. And it's really hard to love when it's like selfishly needed, right? So I think what you're doing is so great as it relates to that. I think that men coming to you are struggling, and they're just like you said, they have all of these different things, the connection with their kids, like that's so huge. And it pains me when I see fathers who don't get to see their kids. And again, it is. And I know that not everybody can do the 50-50. I mean, your careers and your life don't allow for the 50-50 to happen. Logistics, it's hard on the kids. I think those are all really important things. So you deal with values, which I love, aligning values. You deal with love and figuring out what love means to them and what
Well,
they're
I think
striving for.
one of the
And
most
what
important
else?
things, besides their values, of course, is really self-realization. really being self-aware of like being self-aware of your thoughts, number one, being the gatekeeper to your own thoughts, to your mind, and what's going through your mind throughout the day, and just kind of not so much judging your you call it in NLP, we have the conscious mind and the unconscious mind. And we usually run our programs in the unconscious mind. 95% of our day is run unconsciously, like things we don't think about, like brushing our teeth and different things like that we do every day, different habits that we have. And so being self-aware of what's going on is step number one. When you're self-aware and you're not judgmental to that, just watch it and see where you're at. And just that's a big step. And one thing that I teach men is basically how to start their day, how to take control of their day to really, just go out there full of energy and de-stressed. Like most of us wake up in the morning. I'm sure you've heard this. This is said everywhere. And what is the first thing you do? You get on your cell phone and you start looking at emails, and your testosterone goes down, your estrogen goes up, and you're all stressed out already first thing in the morning. And my morning routine is, and what I teach other men to do, is when you wake up, I go to the bathroom to brush my teeth, is what most people do. And however, I change things up a bit. I brush my teeth. I'm right-handed. I brush with my opposite hand, with my left hand. And it just triggers my right side of my brain to activate, which it's been sleeping all night. So now it's activated. And then I'll look in the mirror and I'll stare in the mirror and actually stare at myself. Because most of us, as we look in the mirror, we're not really looking at ourselves. We're just, looking in the mirror, but not at ourselves. And I put my hands down and I just say, I love you 20 times. Like, I love you. And it's amazing. It's amazing what it does. It just, it's so soothing. It's a soothing feeling that you get that's hard to explain. Do that every day. And then you end it with a high five, both hands, because every time we've ever given high fives in our lives, we've been in a good mood. We were celebrating something. So you get a nice dopamine hit first thing in the morning just by high fiving the mirror, high fiving yourself. That's how I start. And then I continue on. I go downstairs and I do a breathing exercise. I'm sure your people are familiar with Wim Hof. Wim Hof has a breathing exercise on YouTube. It's basically 30 breaths in, and then you hold your breath for a minute and a half, and you do 3 sets of that. And that really just gets oxygen in your body and really wakes you up, followed by a 10-minute meditation, gratitude, and things that I want to accomplish for the day, for the week, for the year. And then do a little light exercise, could be half hour. And I tell you, after starting your day that way, it just changes everything. Everything changes for you.
I love those rituals. Those are great. I have been talking about another gratitude ritual that I had heard from a woman who does manifestation work. And she talks about gratitude and doing that first thing in the morning. But she gave this great exercise that gratitude doesn't have to be written down. It doesn't have to be like in a pad of paper. She's like, so you can do something as simple as before you even get out of bed and you're in your comfy bed and you're feeling the sheets on your face and you're moving your hands like, in the nice down comforter that you might have. I have gratitude for this soft bed. I have gratitude for the comfort that I have had, over the course of the night. I have gratitude for being able to open my eyes in the morning to the sun coming in through the window. Just literally that first moment of time where you just don't jump out of bed because the alarm goes off. Like, give yourself a few minutes to just give gratitude for your sense of space and where you are in that moment. And I loved that because I have a really soft bed and I do really have gratitude for that. And I'm an early riser, but I really love the feeling of the sheets. Like, it was just such a simple sensory thing. And I love the fact that you look in the mirror and you tell yourself you love you 30 times. I love that. I think I might be laughing if I did that, but like, and then giving myself some high fives. I mean, like, all right, I got
It's
this
funny,
today.
about a year ago, and for the first, few weeks, she was kind of like giving me a side eye, and now she's doing it. I've caught her doing it, so she does it too. It's great.
That's great. I love that. So these are all great tools in your toolbox. I love that. So this is all our mindfulness work. So we've talked about how to kind of do a mental reset with our values, understanding love, understanding what makes us tick. Like what are our kind of overall life goals for where we're heading. We learn to love ourselves. We give ourselves space. We do our mindfulness work to start our days. These are all incredible stress relievers, and it totally flips that switch. And I have to remind myself in the morning to do that before my cup of coffee, because my cup of coffee like is the thing that's like calling my name. So I was like, okay, not yet. I got those few things I need to get done before I get my cup of coffee is like my reward. And then I exercise. I can't exercise without slivering in that coffee. Like the coffee has to come before. Like, so everyone's got their own little, morning
100%.
rituals. We're
You're starting
doing
your
it.
day right, and you feel like after I've done all that, I feel like I can go into any meeting, I can go into anything because I've accomplished so much, and I have a bit of a dopamine hit. I feel good. I feel good. So I encourage everyone to have a morning routine. It doesn't have to be just like that, but something that just gives you peace.
So, do you have some level of accountability that you create around these types of things with the dads that you're working with? Because I think that it's always nice to say, go do, but it's also really helpful. I know that I run a support group, and every week we talk about a different topic. So last week we talked about decluttering your room, which means decluttering your emotional space. And so we talked a lot about what that is and how to do it. And then I give assignments and create accountability, send a reminder. So the following week, we're going to share the work to make sure that everybody actually did the work versus coming, listening, and then not doing.
Okay,
So
so
tell me a little
depending
bit
on the
more about how
persons,
you
some
keep
people
everybody
are
accountable.
daily check-ins through text, and some are weekly check-ins. And we just keep track of kind of how they started their day, what they did, what they didn't do, why they didn't do it, and kind of that's kind of the foundational piece where when we have our session, we dig down into the root cause of why they didn't do it and what exactly happened and how they felt about that and that's kind of how and I find it really works with the daily check-ins. I think the daily ones are even better because they really feel, they may miss a day but they won't miss more than one day. And the weekly check-ins, there could be 1 or 2 days that they had a late night or whatever the case is that they've missed. But yeah, I really find that's one of the advantages of having a coach is they will keep you accountable. And we all, if you think about it, we all have been coached our whole lives. Our parents were essentially our coaches. Our teachers were our coaches. You don't just show up to school and they give you a bunch of books and say, okay, come back at the end of the year and write your exam. Of course, they've coached you throughout the whole year, right? So I think coaches are the big accountability piece in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I deal so much with people who are at beginning stages contemplating, divorce so very early on. And it's so hard for them to all see straight, right? They're so worried about the divorce itself that they are having a hard time keeping track of themselves, right? So the divorce prioritizes themselves. And so the support groups that we run are really good for that because it's making them on a day part in time say, I'm committing to spending this time on me, and that given that I have accountability for the next week, I'm going to have to spend a little bit more time on me. And, we'll be able to talk about it the following week. And then as I coach them, if they're doing one-to-one coaching, we can dig deeper into the divorce process, the support that they're going to need, the different professionals they should be hiring, not to write the 5-page dissertation to the lawyer because they're going to pay for every minute of that lawyer's time. so again, we revise, we bullet, so I'm dealing with the emotional side, but I'm also dealing with the logistics side to keep people accountable, to make sure they're not overspending on lawyers' fees and some of the other support stuff. So, well, I've really enjoyed, Matteo, learning all about you. And dads really are, it's interesting because I think that there's so many women out there who are so verbal about where they are in this process and the support that they need. They're asking for help in all different arenas, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, or they're joining support groups or going to the church support groups. They're talking to their girlfriends. Men just don't open up like that. And how do you, before we kind of wrap it up, I would be really interested to learn how men are finding you and how resistant they are to the process. And I work with men, and I have some men clients, and they seem to be, open to working with a woman, but yet resistant around the emotional work that needs to be done. How do these men find you?
Right now, what I'm doing is I'm doing a series of videos telling men, basically sharing my story with men and seeing if they resonate with what I'm saying and kind of my struggles. I use myself and my struggles to connect with men, and it's through various social media networks. And so some men do comment through that. I do send them some free tips and tricks on certain things, and that's how kind of I get them in my ecosystem. I also have a website, and yeah, it's through a lot of word of mouth as well. People recommend me. And men are afraid. They're afraid to be judged. They're afraid to really show their emotions and be open because they don't know. I mean, I speak from experience growing up in an Italian household where emotions were not shown, and I was raised that way, so I understand where men are coming through. And I think a lot of men have been raised in that kind of family dynamic where just suck it up and just carry on and forget about it, kind of thing. So I think what's happening is there's been a shift over the last several years with men opening up a little more, and it comes from exposure from male coaches and female coaches, of course, as well. But I think we're headed in the right direction as for men to kind of open up and really look deep inside at themselves to be their best version, not only for themselves, but for everyone around.
Yeah, I think that's such a great way to kind of wrap this up. I always give kind of the three top tips, Matteo, in terms of what I've learned from today. And one, I do want to point out this idea around what you were calling negative gatekeeping. So I believe that that is something that does occur, and you are only in control of the way you react to it. And sometimes rescripting to not point the blame on the divorce, as I added to it, to get a better understanding was, is this negative gatekeeping because we're divorced, or was this the exact behavior that was happening in my marriage? And so getting the thoughts aligned will prevent you from going down this road of, the fact that they're trying to badmouth you to the child. So it might not be that. It might be that. I'm just, trying to rescript it to allow for people to understand it's your thoughts that are creating your feelings. And if your thoughts about what's happening is that they're trying to prevent you from having a good relationship with your kid, could you rescript that by evaluating the actions that were taken to be like, oh, actually, that actually has been happening the entire time. So this is no different than any other day. And part of that is like, you can never have an expectation that your ex is going to show up any differently than they always have, because you have no control over them. They might just continue to be the same person they always have. So that's rule one. The second thing I've learned today is really about being able to work with men and being able to give them some level of accountability and exploration around, what are your values? Do you even know what they are? What are you looking for in your life? And, if love is that thing, what does love mean to you? If you're looking for a relationship, as you said, but you value freedom, how does that work together? And being able to deep dive on that to say like, okay, that's this pretty special woman that I'm going to want to love because I still want my freedom. Not to say that those people aren't out there. I actually might be one of those people. Like I like independence. And so, there's individuals that have anxious attachment style who they want to be with you all the time. And then there's ones who have more of an avoidant attachment style. And if you're one of those people looking for a relationship, but you want your freedom, don't date an anxious attachment individual. I'll tell you that much. And then the third thing is that men in the last few years, like you said, are opening their eyes to vulnerability. They're opening their eyes in being emotionally available. They're opening their eyes to wanting to better themselves. And in order to better yourself, you have to get in touch with how you're feeling. You have to get in touch with telling people how you feel and not being ashamed of doing that. And I'm just going to add the last thing is don't forget Matteo's ritual. I love you. 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 High five. High five.
Thank you,
So
Tania.
thank you again, Matteo, for coming on today. Such a great podcast episode. And everybody can find Matteo on Divorce Dad's Help. All of the information about Matteo will be in our show notes. Thank you for joining us at Better Than Bitter.
Amazing.
And
Thank you
I
for having
hope
me.
that we can have you back on again in the near future.